A farmer challenged the town to tame his dog when a veterinarian did it in hours. Secrets from the past transformed their lives and the entire rural community. Subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Morgan Blackwell stood at the center of the Harvest County Fairgrounds, his weathered face as hard and unyielding as the drought-stricken soil of his 200-acre ranch. At 70, his 6-foot frame remained imposingly straight, though the years had etched deep lines around his steel-blue eyes. His calloused hands, spotted with age but still strong, gripped the leash of Beast, his massive German shepherd who paced anxiously at his side. $50,000. Morgan's voice boomed across the fairground's central pavilion. The annual Harvest Festival was in full swing around them, carnival rides spinning, the scent of funnel cakes and barbecue floating on the late September air. $50,000 to anyone who can get this dog to behave like something better than a wild coyote. Beast snarled on cue, his amber eyes darting nervously at the growing crowd. The dog's midnight black coat gleamed in the afternoon sun, muscles rippling beneath as he pulled against the reinforced leash. "Come on, Blackwell," Sheriff Jim Donovan called out, adjusting his department-issued Stetson. "Nobody's going to take that bet. That dog's been through 6 professional trainers from 3 different states. Then maybe folks should stop telling me how to run my ranch and train my animals." Morgan shot back, his voice carrying the distinctive drawl that had softened little despite 40 years in the Midwest after moving from Texas in his youth. Conversations hushed as locals exchanged knowing glances. Everyone recognized this for what it was: Morgan's pride lashing out after his recent troubles. The 3-year drought had hit his cattle operation harder than most, and rumor had it the bank was circling like vultures. "That dog ain't vicious," Morgan continued. "Just stubborn. Like his owner," he added with a defiant chin lift that dared anyone to challenge him. Sarah Miller, president of the County Agricultural Board, stepped forward. "Morgan, is this really necessary? We're celebrating the harvest, such as it is this year." "What harvest?" Morgan scoffed. "Half the county's running irrigation 24/7 just to keep crops alive. My south pasture's drier than a communion wafer. So yeah, Sarah, I'd say we could all use some entertainment." Beast suddenly lunged at a passing teenager who'd gotten too close, sending the crowd jumping back. Morgan controlled the dog, but just barely. "Ever since that thunderstorm last spring, he's been impossible," Morgan admitted, a rare concession. "Hides under my bed during storms, but the rest of the time, he's this." From the edge of the gathering, a woman observed silently. Dr. Eleanor Ellie Ramirez stood 5'4" in practical hiking boots, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 65, her olive-skinned face carried the gentle lines of someone who smiled often, though at the moment, her expression was one of careful assessment as she studied both dog and owner. "Maybe what Beast needs isn't another trainer," someone from the crowd suggested. "Maybe he needs a miracle worker." Morgan's laugh was harsh. "Well, when you find one, send him my way. Until then, the offer stands. $50,000, cash, to anyone who can fix what's wrong with this dog. Lord knows I've tried everything." As the crowd began to disperse, returning to the festival attractions, Ellie continued watching. Something in the way Beast moved, the particular pattern of his anxiety, sparked her professional interest. After 4 decades treating animals in Chicago's busiest veterinary hospital, she recognized trauma when she saw it. "Excuse me," she said to a passing vendor. "Who exactly is that man with the German shepherd?" "That's Morgan Blackwell," came the reply. "Owns Blackwell Ranch out on County Road 8. Been here forever, stubborn as they come." "Why? You thinking of taking his challenge?" Ellie smiled mysteriously. "Perhaps. I think that dog has something to say. If only someone would listen properly." The next morning dawned clear and cool over Harvest County. Ellie Ramirez drove her 10-year-old Subaru Outback down the dusty lane leading to Blackwell Ranch, gravel crunching beneath her tires. She'd spent half the night researching the property on her laptop in the small rented cottage on the outskirts of town. The ranch had been in the Blackwell family for 4 generations, once spanning over 1,000 acres before economic pressures forced parcels to be sold off. As she approached the weathered 2-story farmhouse with its wraparound porch, Ellie noticed several trucks parked haphazardly in the yard. Word had spread fast. Curious townspeople had gathered to witness the inevitable failure of the city woman. She parked and stepped out, wearing practical khaki pants and a lightweight blue button-down shirt. The small leather bag she carried contained tools gathered over decades of veterinary practice, but nothing anyone would recognize as traditional training equipment. "Well, look who decided to show up," Morgan called from the porch, arms crossed over his chest. He wore faded jeans and a plaid shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle from decades of physical labor. "Dr. Ramirez from Chicago, right? Someone told me you were asking questions at the feed store." "That's right," Ellie replied evenly, her voice carrying a quiet confidence. "I believe I might be able to help with your dog." A ripple of murmurs spread through the onlookers. Morgan's niece, Jessica Blackwell, stepped forward. In her mid-30s with honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she managed the county's agricultural cooperative and possessed a pragmatism her uncle often lacked. "Uncle Morgan, maybe we should hear her out," Jessica suggested. "What's to hear? Another city slicker with fancy ideas that don't work on a real ranch," Morgan scoffed. "No offense, ma'am, but we've tried everything with Beast. Professional trainers from Kansas City, St. Louis, even as far as Denver. And how many of them try to understand why Beast behaves the way he does?" Ellie asked calmly. "Not just how to control him." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "You saying you know my dog better than I do? I raised him from a pup. I'm saying trauma changes animals, just like it changes people," Ellie replied. "May I see him?" Morgan hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "Jess, bring Beast out." Jessica disappeared into the house, returning moments later with the powerful German shepherd straining against a heavy-duty leash. Beast's hackles were raised, his ears pinned back as he growled at the assembled crowd. "Everyone stay back," Morgan warned. "He's worse around strangers." Ellie stood perfectly still, not making eye contact with the dog, but observing his body language. The thunderstorm that frightened him, was it during the night? Was he alone? Morgan looked surprised. "How'd you know that?" "Yeah, worst electrical storm we've had in years. I was in Kansas City at a livestock auction. Beast was just over a year old. Lightning struck the old oak by the barn," Jessica added. "Split it clean in half. The crash was like nothing I'd ever heard." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the dog. Morgan looked skeptical but handed her the leash. "Your funeral." The crowd held its collective breath as Ellie slowly knelt down, still not looking directly at Beast. From her bag, she removed what appeared to be a small blanket and gently placed it on the ground. "This contains scents that are calming to dogs," she explained quietly, more to Beast than the onlookers. Then she began to hum, a low, steady tone that seemed to confuse the dog. His aggressive posture faltered. "What kind of hocus-pocus is this?" someone whispered. "Shoo!" Jessica hushed them. For the next 20 minutes, Ellie worked with Beast using techniques none of them had seen before, movements that seemed part Tai Chi, part animal communication. She spoke to him in a voice too low for others to hear, occasionally offering something from her bag that the dog cautiously sniffed. "The thunder isn't coming back right now," she said clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're safe, and your people are safe." To everyone's astonishment, Beast's aggressive demeanor gradually melted away. His ears relaxed, his tail lowered from its rigid position. "I'll be damned," whispered Sheriff Donovan. Morgan watched with increasing disbelief as 2 hours later, Beast sat calmly at Ellie's side, following basic commands and even allowing her to check his teeth and paws, something that had required sedation at his last veterinary visit. "That's impossible," Morgan finally said, his voice hollow. "What did you do to him?" Ellie smiled gently. "I listened to what he was trying to tell you all along. He's not aggressive, he's terrified. And terror looks like aggression in animals who can't escape." Beast looked up at Ellie, then trotted over to Morgan and sat at his feet, the first time he'd approached his owner calmly in months. "I believe you owe me $50,000, Mr. Blackwell," Ellie said quietly. Morgan's face darkened. "This is some kind of trick. Some kind of magic," Ellie suggested, a slight edge to her voice. "Or perhaps just 40 years of veterinary medicine and animal behavior study." The gathered crowd waited, tension thick in the air. 3 days after Ellie's demonstration, Morgan Blackwell still hadn't paid the wager. The story had spread through Harvest County like wildfire, becoming the primary topic at the Crossroads Diner, the Thursday night bowling league, and after Sunday services at First Methodist Church. "Morgan's just being stubborn," said Hal Peterson, the owner of Peterson's Feed and Supply, as he rang up Ellie's purchases. He'll come around eventually. Ellie carefully selected supplements for Beast's diet. I'm not worried about the money, Mr. Peterson. I'm more concerned about the dog. Those behavior modifications need consistent reinforcement. Call me Hal, please, he said, bagging her items. And don't take it personal. Morgan's been through a rough patch these last few years. Losing Martha, his wife, to cancer, then the drought hitting his operation harder than most. Man's proud to a fault. Ellie nodded thoughtfully. Pride can be expensive. As she drove her Subaru up to Morgan's ranch later that afternoon, she noticed significant changes to Beast's outdoor kennel. The chain-link enclosure had been expanded, and a new doghouse stood inside, larger and more insulated than the previous one. Morgan was nowhere to be seen, but Jessica emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on a rag. Dr. Ramirez, she called, walking over with a tired smile. What brings you back? I brought some things for Beast, Ellie replied, lifting her bag. And please, call me Ellie. Jessica's expression turned apologetic. About Uncle Morgan. He's being a stubborn old mule, came Morgan's voice as he rounded the corner of the barn. He'd clearly been working hard. Sweat had soaked through his shirt despite the cool autumn air. Don't need to sugarcoat it, Jess. He approached, maintaining a careful distance from Ellie. Come to collect, have you? Actually, Ellie said, I brought some dietary supplements for Beast. They'll help strengthen his nervous system. And I wrote down the behavior reinforcement techniques. Morgan's eyebrows lifted slightly. You're helping the dog, even though I haven't paid? Beast didn't make the wager. You did, Ellie replied evenly. Jessica smiled. I'll take those. I've been working with him while Uncle Morgan's been busy. Her meaningful glance at her uncle spoke volumes. Avoiding me? Ellie suggested with a slight smile. Morgan's weathered face flushed. I've got a ranch to run, Dr. Ramirez. Drought means double the work for half the yield. Uncle Morgan's been re-examining the irrigation system for the east pasture, Jessica explained, shooting him a pointed look, which could use a fresh perspective if you're interested. Jessica, Morgan warned. What? Dr. Ramirez grew up on a farm. She mentioned it when she was working with Beast, Jessica persisted. And we're facing the worst drought in 30 years. Pride won't water the fields, Uncle Morgan. An uncomfortable silence settled among them. Finally, Morgan exhaled heavily. Fine. You've made your point, Jess. He turned to Ellie, his expression a complex mixture of resentment and resignation. I'm not paying the bet because I think you used some kind of trick with Beast. No dog turns around that fast. It wasn't a trick, Ellie said firmly. It was understanding. That dog experienced a traumatic event during an electrical storm and developed an anxiety response that manifested as aggression. I simply helped him feel safe again. And how exactly did you manage that miracle in 2 hours when professional trainers couldn't do it in months? Morgan challenged, stepping closer. Because I didn't try to break him down to build him back up, Ellie replied, holding her ground. That approach doesn't work with trauma. I met him where he was. Beast emerged from around the house. His demeanor dramatically changed from their first meeting. He approached cautiously but without aggression, sniffing toward Ellie. See? He remembers me, she said softly. Memory and association are powerful tools in healing. Morgan watched as Beast sat beside Ellie, allowing her to stroke his head. Something in the rancher's hard expression cracked slightly. The drought, he finally said, looking toward the eastern fields where withered corn stalks stood like skeletal remains. You really know something about irrigation? I do, Ellie nodded. My father pioneered water conservation techniques in southern Illinois during the drought of '88. Some of his methods are still used today. Show me, Morgan said, not quite a request, but no longer a challenge. As they walked toward the east pasture, Beast fell into step beside them, occasionally looking up at both humans as if approving of this tentative truce. I'm not saying I can save your whole ranch, Ellie cautioned. But there are approaches you might not have considered. At this point, Morgan admitted gruffly, I'm running out of options faster than I'm running out of water. And that's saying something. Jessica watched them walk away, a small smile playing at her lips. Beast, once a symbol of stubborn aggression, now moved peacefully between the two most headstrong people in Harvest County, as if the dog, at least, understood that healing could come in unexpected forms. The following week brought no rain, but it did bring change to Blackwell Ranch. Ellie's irrigation suggestions, A combination of her father's techniques and modern approaches she'd studied were cautiously implemented on a 5-acre test section of the eastern pasture. Morgan had agreed reluctantly, only after Jessica insisted they had nothing to lose. The key is soil conservation first, then water management, Ellie explained one morning as she knelt in the parched earth, crumbling a handful of soil between her fingers. Her eyes, dark and perceptive, assessed the composition with practiced ease. Your soil has good structure underneath, but the surface is baked hard. It's repelling water instead of absorbing it. Morgan stood nearby, arms crossed defensively. Been farming this land 40 years, Dr. Ramirez. My father farmed it 40 before that. And neither of you faced a 3-year drought with rising temperatures. Ellie replied without looking up. The climate is changing, Mr. Blackwell, whether we like it or not. Morgan, he corrected gruffly. If you're going to tell me I've been doing everything wrong all these years, you might as well use my first name. Ellie smiled slightly. I'm not saying wrong. I'm saying different circumstances require different approaches. Beast trotted up, nudging Morgan's hand with his nose. The transformation in the dog continued to astonish everyone. Though still wary during windy days that might signal storms, he had become increasingly calm and even playful. At least someone around here trusts you, Morgan muttered, scratching behind Beast's ears. I've ordered drought-resistant cover crops for between your rows, Ellie continued. They'll arrive tomorrow. They help retain moisture and break up the compacted soil. Morgan's jaw tightened. Those materials cost money I don't have to throw away on experiments. Actually, Jessica interrupted, approaching with a clipboard. I secured a grant from the State Agricultural Extension Office. They're interested in our test plot as a demonstration site. Morgan's eyebrows shot up. You did what? Without asking me. Jessica squared her shoulders. The bank called yesterday, Uncle Morgan. 3 more ranches in the county are foreclosing next month. We need to try something different. Damn it, Jess, I'm still the owner of this property. Morgan's voice rose sharply, causing Beast to back away, ears flattening. And I'm trying to make sure it stays that way. Jessica shot back. The co-op board voted unanimously to support this project. Even Mayor Thompson is interested. So the whole town is talking about Blackwell Ranch failing. Morgan's face flushed dark red. Perfect. Just perfect. Ellie watched the exchange quietly, then spoke in the same calm tone she'd used with Beast. No one thinks you're failing, Morgan. They think you're innovating. There's a difference. Her words seemed to penetrate his anger. He exhaled heavily, looking out across his struggling fields. Fine, but I want daily reports on water usage and soil conditions. Already set it up, Jessica replied, her voice softening. We're installing soil moisture sensors this afternoon. As Morgan stalked off toward the barn, Ellie and Jessica exchanged glances. He's scared, Jessica said quietly, watching her uncle's retreating back. I've never seen him like this, not even when Aunt Martha got sick. Fear often looks like anger, Ellie observed, especially in those who've never learned to express it any other way. Like Beast, Jessica realized. Ellie nodded. Exactly like Beast. Later that afternoon, as Ellie calibrated the soil sensors, she noticed Morgan standing at the edge of the field, staring at something in his hand. Curiosity drew her over. Everything all right? She asked. Morgan hesitated, then opened his palm to reveal a tarnished silver pocket watch. My grandfather's. He bought this land with money from the railroad. Built everything from nothing. Ellie recognized the gesture for what it was, a rare moment of vulnerability. He'd be proud of how you're fighting to keep it, she offered quietly. Morgan's weathered face twisted with emotion he quickly suppressed. Would he? Or would he think I'm the generation that lost the Blackwell legacy? You haven't lost anything yet, Ellie said firmly. And adaptation is part of any legacy that lasts. Morgan closed his fist around the watch. That how you see it? Adaptation. It's how I survived in Chicago for 40 years, Ellie admitted. A small-town girl in a big-city profession dominated by men. I either adapted or disappeared. Something shifted in Morgan's expression, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even respect. You said you grew up on a farm. Where exactly? About 200 miles east of here, Ellie replied carefully. Small place called Riverdale. Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. Riverdale? Why does that sound familiar? Before Ellie could respond, Beast suddenly perked up his ears and raced toward the driveway, where Jessica was returning with the mayor and several members of the agricultural cooperative. "Looks like you've got company," Ellie said, relief evident in her voice. "I should check those Western sensors before dark." As she walked away, Morgan watched her with newfound curiosity. Something about Dr. Ramirez didn't quite add up. Her reluctance to discuss her past, her convenient appearance at precisely the moment his challenge was issued, her expertise in both animals and agriculture. For the first time, he wondered if her arrival in Harvest County was entirely coincidental. The annual Millbrook Founders Day celebration arrived on a crisp October Saturday, bringing the entire community to the town square. Colorful banners hung between century-old oak trees, and the scent of apple cider and barbecue filled the air. For generations, this festival had been the heart of Harvest County's social calendar, a day when farm work paused and neighbors reconnected. Morgan Blackwell stood uncomfortably near the judge's tent, where his prized Angus bull was competing in the livestock exhibition. Though his cattle operation had shrunk considerably during the drought, this particular animal represented hope, a genetic line he'd carefully cultivated for decades. "Morgan, glad you made it," called Sheriff Donovan, approaching with a paper plate loaded with brisket. "Thought you might skip this year. What with everything going on?" "Been coming to Founders Day since I was in diapers," Morgan replied gruffly. "Takes more than a dry spell to break tradition." The sheriff nodded toward the community center, where a small crowd had gathered. "Your dog's causing quite a stir over there." Morgan turned to see Beast sitting calmly beside Jessica as children cautiously approached to pet him. Dr. Ramirez stood nearby, giving subtle hand signals that only Beast and Morgan seemed to notice. "Remarkable turnaround," the sheriff continued. "Folks are calling it the miracle of Millbrook. Heard Dr. Ramirez has been helping with your irrigation issues too." Morgan's expression darkened. "Town sure has a lot to say about my business." "Small towns, Morgan. No secrets." The sheriff shrugged. "Speaking of which, did you know she's from Riverdale?" Morgan's attention sharpened. "She mentioned it. Name sounds familiar." "Should. The Ramirez farm was involved in that big watershed dispute back in the 70s. Your father testified in that case, if I recall correctly." Before Morgan could respond, a commotion erupted near the community center. A clap of thunder, unexpected from the clear sky, had sent Beast into sudden panic. The dog bolted, knocking over a display table and sending children scrambling. Several men moved to intercept the frightened animal, but their pursuit only intensified Beast's terror. "Damn it," Morgan muttered, hurrying toward the chaos. "Someone's gonna get hurt." As he approached, he saw 7-year-old Lily Chun, the daughter of the town's only doctor, frozen in fear as Beast charged blindly in her direction. Morgan broke into a run, knowing he wouldn't reach her in time. But someone else did. Ellie appeared seemingly from nowhere, placing herself between the child and the panicked dog. Instead of grabbing for Beast's collar, she dropped to one knee and made a specific gesture with her hand, the same calming technique Morgan had watched her practice with the dog for weeks. "Easy, Beast. Thunder passing. Thunder passing," she said firmly but gently. To everyone's astonishment, Beast skidded to a halt, his panic visibly receding as he focused on Ellie's familiar signals. Within moments, the dog had gone from charging to sitting, still trembling but no longer dangerous. Morgan reached them, breathing hard. "What happened?" "There's not a cloud in the sky. The sound system," Ellie explained, continuing to soothe Beast. The feedback made a sound similar to thunder. It triggered his trauma response. Dr. Chin arrived, scooping up his daughter. "That dog nearly." "But he didn't," Ellie interrupted calmly. "He stopped." He remembered his training. The crowd that had gathered watched in amazement as Beast, now recognizing Morgan, moved to his side and sat obediently. "Your dog just saved my little girl," Dr. Chin said, his initial anger fading to bewilderment. "Actually," Morgan said quietly, "I think Dr. Ramirez saved her." The incident quickly became the talk of the festival. By afternoon, the story had transformed. Now Beast was the hero who had protected little Lily from dangerous speaker equipment, with Dr. Ramirez guiding his actions. Morgan found himself receiving congratulations for his remarkable dog from people who'd avoided both him and Beast for months. "Funny how stories change," Jessica commented as she joined Morgan at the refreshment tent. "Yesterday, Beast was the dangerous dog nobody wanted near their children. Today, he's the town hero. People see what they want to see." Morgan replied, watching as Ellie demonstrated proper petting techniques to a group of fascinated children, Beast serving as the willing model. Mayor Thompson approached, her campaign button prominent on her lapel. Morgan, we've been discussing the demonstration plots on your east pasture. The county extension office is extremely impressed with the preliminary moisture readings. Morgan straightened. They've only been implemented for 2 weeks, which makes the results even more remarkable, the mayor continued. We'd like to feature your ranch in the agricultural innovation segment of the county newsletter. With your permission, of course. Morgan hesitated, his pride warring with practical need. The methods weren't my idea, but the courage to try them was. Jessica interjected. Uncle Morgan, this could help other ranchers. After a long moment, Morgan nodded. Fine, but make sure Dr. Ramirez gets proper credit. Those are her techniques. Mayor Thompson smiled broadly. Excellent. We'll arrange a proper photographer next week. She lowered her voice confidentially. And between us, the State Agricultural Board is considering emergency funding for drought mitigation. Innovative ranchers will be first in line. As the mayor moved away, Jessica squeezed her uncle's arm. That could be the financial break we've been praying for. Morgan watched as Ellie and Beast continued their impromptu demonstration, now drawing an even larger crowd. Something had shifted today, not just in how the town viewed his troublesome dog, but in how he viewed the stubborn veterinarian who had walked into his life and refused to leave. Riverdale, he said suddenly. The watershed case. Her father was Joaquin Ramirez. Jessica looked confused. Does that mean something to you? Morgan's expression was unreadable. It means Dr. Ramirez has been keeping secrets, and I intend to find out why. 3 weeks after the Founders' Day festival, the rain finally came. Not the torrential downpour everyone had prayed for, but a gentle, steady drizzle that lasted 2 full days. On Blackwell Ranch, the difference between the traditional fields and Ellie's demonstration plots was striking. The experimental acres absorbed the precious moisture like a sponge, while water pooled and ran off the hardened surface of the conventional fields. Morgan stood at the boundary between the 2 sections, his boots sinking slightly into the softened earth of the test plot. The moisture sensors Jessica had installed showed remarkable readings, nearly 40% better water retention in the treated soil. Even Morgan couldn't deny the results. Impressive, isn't it? Ellie approached, wearing a weathered rain jacket, Beast trotting contentedly at her side. The cover crops are already creating microchannels for water penetration. Morgan nodded grudgingly. The numbers speak for themselves. He hesitated, then added, Your father would have been proud. Ellie's expression froze. My father? Joaquin Ramirez, Morgan said, watching her reaction carefully. Pioneer in watershed management. Activist in the Riverdale water rights case of '77. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain and Beast's curious whine. You knew who I was all along, Ellie finally said. Not right away, Morgan admitted. The name Ramirez is common enough. But Riverdale jogged something in my memory. Sheriff Donovan filled in the blanks at the festival. Ellie's shoulders tensed. And now I want to know why Joaquin Ramirez's daughter showed up at my ranch under such convenient circumstances, Morgan said, his voice hardening. The daughter of the man who sued half the county over water rights 40 years ago. I didn't sue anyone, Ellie retorted, a flash of anger breaking through her composure. I was 19 when that happened. I was already at veterinary school. But you knew who I was, Morgan pressed. You knew my father testified against yours in that case. You knew the Blackwells were central to your father losing his farm. Ellie's dark eyes flashed. Is that what you think happened? That we lost our farm because of your family's testimony? Didn't you? We lost our farm because my father was right too soon. Ellie's voice rose with long-suppressed emotion. He warned about aquifer depletion and pesticide runoff decades before anyone would listen. The lawsuit wasn't about winning. It was about getting the truth on record. Morgan was taken aback by her vehemence. Then why come here? Why now? Because I inherited my father's research when he died last year, Ellie said more quietly. 40 years of data on this region's soil and water. When I retired from my practice, I decided to see what had become of the warnings he gave. So this is about proving him right? Morgan's voice was skeptical. This is about saving what can be saved, Ellie corrected him. I heard about your challenge with Beast by accident, but once I saw your land. She gestured to the fields around them. I recognized the patterns my father documented decades ago. The topsoil depletion, the moisture resistance. Convenient timing, Morgan said, still suspicious. Or maybe just necessary timing, Ellie countered. Your ranch is showing the exact symptoms my father predicted would happen without intervention. And your eastern acreage sits directly above the aquifer junction he was most concerned about. Morgan fell silent, processing this information. The rain continued to fall gently around them, the sound somehow emphasizing the gravity of their conversation. If I told you who I was, would you have listened? Ellie finally asked. Before Morgan could answer, Beast suddenly perked up his ears and darted away from them, racing toward the old well near the property line. Beast, Morgan called sharply. What's gotten into him? They hurried after the dog, who had reached the well and was barking urgently, pawing at the ground beside the old stone structure. As they got closer, they heard it, a child's cry for help, faint but unmistakable. Someone's down there, Ellie gasped. Morgan dropped to his knees beside the well, calling down. Hello? Who's there? Help, came the frightened reply. I'm stuck. The stone broke when I was climbing. Morgan recognized the voice instantly. Tommy Wilson? What are you doing on my property? Taking a shortcut home from school, came the tearful reply. Please help me, Mr. Blackwell. Morgan turned to Ellie, his face grave. The well's narrow. Rescue squad won't get here for at least 30 minutes, and that stone facing is crumbling from the rain. Without hesitation, Ellie was already shrugging off her rain jacket. I'm smaller than you. I can go down if you can lower me. That's too dangerous, Morgan protested. We don't have time to argue, Ellie insisted. That boy's been missing pieces of the county's history, but right now, all that matters is getting him out safely. Their eyes locked in a moment of understanding. Decades of family history, resentment, and suspicion momentarily set aside by the immediate crisis. Beast found him, Morgan said quietly. The dog everyone wanted put down 2 months ago just saved that child's life. As they rigged a makeshift harness from rope in Morgan's truck, the rain fell harder, washing away old boundaries along with the drought-hardened soil. The operation to rescue Tommy Wilson unfolded in tense minutes that seemed to stretch for hours. With the rain steadily increasing, Morgan secured the rope around Ellie's waist, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite his concern. I'll lower you down slowly, he explained, testing the knots. Signal with 3 tugs if you need me to pull you up faster. Ellie nodded, her focus entirely on the task ahead. Beast, stay, she commanded firmly. The German shepherd whined but obeyed, watching anxiously from a few feet away. Be careful, Morgan said gruffly as she prepared to descend. That well's been there since my grandfather's time. I'll bring him up, she promised. Morgan began lowering her into the narrow opening. The stone walls of the old well were slick with moisture, patches of moss catching on Ellie's clothing as she descended. 15 feet down, she spotted Tommy, a terrified 10-year-old clinging to a small ledge where part of the well's interior had collapsed. Hey there, she called softly. I'm Dr. Ramirez. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm sorry, Tommy sobbed. I know we're not supposed to cut through Mr. Blackwell's property. Let's worry about that later, Ellie replied, continuing her careful descent. Right now, I need you to stay very still. When she reached the boy, she could see his predicament clearly. He'd fallen onto a small shelf of stone, but the aged bricks were crumbling beneath him. One wrong move could send them both tumbling into the water below. Morgan, she called up. I need about 3 more feet of rope. The ledge won't hold both of us. Above ground, Morgan played out more line, his muscles straining against the combined weight. Beast paced nervously around the well opening, whining with each gust of wind that carried the rising scent of rain. Almost there, Ellie encouraged Tommy. I'm going to secure this rope around you, and Mr. Blackwell will pull you straight up. Don't try to climb, just let him do the work. With careful movements, she fastened the rope around the boy's small frame, creating a harness from the extra length Morgan had provided. Pull him up, she shouted. I'll brace against the wall. Morgan began hauling on the rope, his weathered hands burning as the wet fibers slid against his palms. Tommy rose slowly, Ellie guiding him to avoid the crumbling sections of stonework. Just as the boy neared the top, a large section of the ledge Ellie had been standing on gave way. She scrambled for purchase, her fingers digging into the wet stone as debris splashed into the water below. "Ellie," Morgan shouted, hearing the collapse. "Get the boy first," she called back, her voice strained as she clung to the slippery wall. With a final heave, Morgan pulled Tommy to safety, quickly untying the rope. "Hold on, Ellie. I'm sending the rope back down." Beast barked frantically, sensing the danger. Morgan worked with desperate speed, securing the rope for Ellie's ascent. "Ready?" he called down. "Ready," came her reply, weaker than before. The climb out was excruciating. Twice Ellie slipped, saved only by Morgan's iron grip on the rope. When she finally emerged from the well, soaked and covered in mud, Morgan pulled her well clear of the opening before the relief hit him. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Ellie nodded, breathing hard. "Tommy, I'm okay," the boy said shakily, huddled beneath Morgan's jacket. "Thank you for saving me." In the distance, sirens wailed as the rescue squad and Tommy's parents approached. Beast circled the three of them, checking each person with concerned sniffs. "Your dog knew," Tommy said suddenly. "How did he know I was down there?" Morgan and Ellie exchanged a meaningful look. "Beast has good instincts," Morgan said. "Better than most people gave him credit for." As the emergency vehicles pulled into the ranch yard, Morgan helped Ellie to her feet. "That was damn foolish," he said quietly. "Brave, but foolish. Runs in the family, apparently," Ellie replied with a tired smile. Later, after Tommy had been checked over by paramedics and tearfully reunited with his parents, Morgan found Ellie sitting on his porch steps, wrapped in a blanket Jessica had provided. The rain had eased to a gentle patter, and Beast lay at her feet, unwilling to leave her side. Morgan sat down beside her, offering a steaming mug. "Hot coffee. Doctor's orders." She accepted with a grateful nod. "Jessica, fussing over the boy like a mother hen," Morgan replied. "She's called everyone in town with the news." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the events of the day settling around them like the mist over the fields. "Your father," Morgan finally said. "He was right, wasn't he? About the water table. About the farming practices." Ellie stared out at the rain-washed landscape. "Yes, but it didn't matter that he was right. What mattered was that people weren't ready to hear it." Morgan's weathered fingers curled around his own mug. "My father testified against him because he truly believed Joaquin was wrong. He wasn't a cruel man, just stubborn," Ellie suggested with a small smile. "Set in his ways," Morgan corrected, though his mouth quirked slightly. "Like father, like son, I suppose." "The Ramirez legacy as well," Ellie admitted. "My father never stopped believing he could change things. Even after we lost the farm, he kept his research going. Worked as a farmhand for other people just to stay close to the land." Morgan's expression grew thoughtful. "And now his daughter returns to finish his work." "Not to finish it," Ellie clarified. "To continue it. Some things take more than one lifetime to change." As they talked, Beast suddenly raised his head, ears perked toward the driveway. Moments later, Jessica's car appeared, followed by several trucks bearing the logos of local news outlets. "What now?" Morgan groaned. "The story's out," Jessica explained as she hurried onto the porch. "Beast and Dr. Ramirez are hometown heroes. The news van from Springfield wants interviews about the rescue." Morgan looked at Ellie with sudden concern. "If they start digging into backgrounds, they'll find the connection between our families," she finished his thought. "The old lawsuit. Your father's testimony." Jessica looked between them, confusion evident. "What connection?" Morgan sighed heavily. "It's a long story, Jess. One I should have told you years ago." As reporters began setting up cameras in the yard, Morgan, Ellie, and Jessica retreated into the house. Beast positioned himself protectively at the door, his transformation from problem to guardian now complete. Inside, Morgan faced the past he'd avoided for decades, and the future that was rushing toward him faster than he'd ever expected. The morning after Tommy's rescue brought unexpected clarity to Blackwell Ranch. County officials, prompted by the incident, arrived to inspect the well and the surrounding area. What they discovered sent ripples of concern throughout the property. "The water samples show significant levels of chemical contamination," explained Diane Kruger, the environmental compliance officer, spreading maps across Morgan's kitchen table. "These readings match the pattern we'd expect from decades of improper pesticide application." Morgan's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "Are you saying my land is poisoned?" "Not irreversibly," Diane clarified. But it will require remediation before the groundwater is safe again. Jessica thumbed through the thick report. What about the crops? The livestock? The eastern test plots show minimal contamination, Diane pointed out. Dr. Ramirez's methods appear to have created a natural filtration system that's already showing results. All eyes turned to Ellie, who stood by the window with Beast at her side. The morning sunlight caught the silver in her dark hair as she studied the property beyond. I suspected as much, she admitted quietly. The soil samples matched patterns my father documented in similar cases. You knew? Morgan's voice was dangerously soft. I had concerns, Ellie corrected, turning to face him. But I needed more evidence before raising an alarm that could affect your livelihood. Mayor Thompson, who had arrived with the county officials, cleared her throat. There's a state emergency fund for agricultural remediation. Given the public safety element with the well incident, I believe we can expedite the application. Public safety, Morgan echoed. Are you saying I've been endangering people? No one is assigning blame, Morgan, the mayor replied diplomatically. These pesticides were considered safe when they were applied. Science evolves. And testing costs money, Jessica added. Money we haven't had. The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock, a Blackwell family heirloom that had witnessed 4 generations of family crises. I can help, Ellie finally said. Environmental recovery was my secondary specialty in Chicago. We handled similar cases after industrial accidents affected pets and livestock. Morgan turned to her, conflict evident in his expression. Why would you help? After what my family did to yours? Because this isn't about our fathers anymore, Ellie replied simply. It's about this land, and it's about doing what's right. The officials exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the personal undercurrents. I'll need to consult with the bank, Morgan said finally, his voice hollow. See what's left to salvage. Uncle Morgan, Jessica began, but he raised a hand to silence her. Everybody out, he ordered. I need to think. As the officials gathered their materials, Morgan stopped Ellie at the door. Not you, doctor. We have things to discuss. When they were alone, with only Beast's watchful presence as witness, Morgan poured 2 fingers of bourbon into glass tumblers and handed one to Ellie. My grandfather would roll over in his grave, he said bitterly. Blackwell land contaminated, needing government money to fix it. Your grandfather didn't have the information we have now, Ellie said, accepting the drink but not sipping. No one did. But your father suspected, Morgan pressed. That's what the lawsuit was really about, wasn't it? Not just water rights, but contamination. Ellie nodded slowly. He had preliminary findings. Nothing conclusive by today's standards, but enough to concern him. The court dismissed his evidence as speculative. Morgan drained his glass in one swallow. And now, 40 years later, his daughter shows up to witness the reckoning. I didn't come for vindication, Ellie insisted. Didn't you? Morgan challenged, his blue eyes sharp despite his age. Be honest, doctor. When you heard about Beast, about my challenge, wasn't there some part of you that wanted to see Hank Blackwell's son brought low? Ellie considered the question with the same careful attention she gave to difficult diagnoses. Perhaps at first, she admitted. But that changed when I met your dog. When I saw your land. When I saw how much you loved both, despite everything. Morgan turned to the window, his shoulders carrying the weight of generations. If the land is contaminated, the Blackwell legacy ends with me. No bank will finance a cleanup and keep me operating. Not if you try to do things the old way, Ellie agreed. But the test plots prove the land can recover. And Beast proves that even the most troubled cases can be turned around with the right approach. Beautiful metaphor, Doc, Morgan said with a sardonic smile. But metaphors don't pay the mortgage. No, Ellie agreed. But innovation might. Your niece already secured one grant. The emergency fund could cover remediation. And she hesitated. And what? Morgan prompted. I have resources, Ellie said carefully. My practice in Chicago was successful. I sold it for a considerable sum when I retired. Morgan stiffened. I don't want your charity. Not charity, Ellie corrected. Investment. A partnership to create a demonstration farm that shows how traditional agriculture can adapt to climate change and environmental challenges. Your experience, my research, Jessica's connections. Beast whined softly, moving from Ellie's side to Morgan's, as if physically bridging the gap between them. Why would you invest in the family that helped destroy yours? Morgan asked, the question gentler now. Ellie's expression softened. Because my father never wanted destruction. He wanted change. Sometimes it takes generations for the right moment to arrive. Morgan absently scratched Beast's ears, the dog leaning into his touch. The simple confidence of the animal, once so troubled, now so assured, seemed to calm the rancher. I need time to think, he said finally. This isn't just my decision. Jessica has a stake in this land too. Of course, Ellie agreed, setting down her untouched bourbon. But don't wait too long. The test's plots show promise, but they're just the beginning. As she moved toward the door, Morgan called after her. Ellie. It was the first time he'd used her first name. For what it's worth, I think your father would be proud of what you're doing, even if it's with a Blackwell. A smile touched Ellie's lips. And I think your father, if he could see Beast now, might admit he was wrong about a few things too. As she left the house, Beast followed her to the porch, then looked back at Morgan with an expectant gaze, as if asking why he wasn't following as well. The symbolism wasn't lost on the rancher. The dog he'd nearly given up on now trying to lead him toward a future he hadn't imagined possible. The weeks following Tommy's rescue and the contamination revelation brought a flurry of activity to Blackwell Ranch. County environmental teams arrived daily, taking soil samples and setting up remediation equipment. The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled "Historic Ranch Faces Modern Challenge," featuring photographs of Morgan and Ellie standing side by side at the edge of the test plots. Morgan had finally relented, agreeing to a formal partnership with Ellie to save his family's legacy. Though he remained guarded about their personal history, he couldn't deny the results of her methods or the crisis they now faced together. Early one crisp November morning, as frost coated the pastures, Jessica's car pulled into the driveway, followed by an unfamiliar vehicle with Illinois license plates. Morgan, who was repairing a fence near the barn, watched curiously as a young woman emerged from the passenger seat. "Uncle Morgan," Jessica called, waving him over. "Look who's home for Thanksgiving break." Morgan's weathered face broke into a rare, genuine smile as he recognized his granddaughter, Abigail, Jessica's niece and his late son's only child. At 23, she was the spitting image of her grandmother Martha, with the same determined chin and intelligent eyes. "Grandpa." Abigail embraced him warmly, undeterred by his work-soiled clothes. "The place looks different. Should see the East 40, Morgan replied gruffly, though his eyes shone with pride. "Got some new ideas working over there. That's actually why I came home early," Abigail said, her excitement barely contained. "Jessica told me about Dr. Ramirez and the remediation project. It's exactly what I've been studying at vet school." Morgan's eyebrows rose. "You're still at University of Illinois?" "Third year," Abigail confirmed. "Specializing in large animal medicine with a focus on environmental impact." My advisor nearly fell out of his chair when I mentioned Blackwell Ranch was implementing cutting-edge soil restoration techniques. Jessica grinned triumphantly. "Told you the test plots would put us on the map." The sound of tires on gravel announced Ellie's arrival. As she stepped from her car, Beast bounded across the yard to greet her, his transformation from problem animal to beloved companion now complete. "Dr. Ramirez," Jessica called, "come meet Abigail. She's my cousin's daughter, Morgan's granddaughter, home from veterinary school." Ellie approached with a warm smile that froze slightly as she took in Abigail's features. Something in the young woman's face triggered a flicker of recognition, a connection to the past that both she and Morgan had been carefully sidestepping. "You look just like your grandmother," Ellie said softly. "You knew my grandmother?" Abigail asked, surprised. An uncomfortable silence fell as Morgan and Ellie exchanged glances. "Dr. Ramirez is from Riverdale," Morgan explained carefully. "Our families knew of each other." "That's putting it mildly," Jessica muttered, earning a sharp look from her uncle. "I'd love to hear about the old days," Abigail said innocently. "None of the family ever talks much about what happened before I was born." "Perhaps another time," Ellie suggested diplomatically. "I understand you're studying veterinary medicine?" "I practiced in Chicago for 40 years. Abigail's eyes widened. "Chicago Animal Medical Center? That's one of the top veterinary hospitals in the Midwest. I founded it," Ellie acknowledged modestly. "Oh my God," Abigail breathed. "You're that Dr. Ramirez?" We just studied your paper on environmental trauma responses in domestic animals last semester. Morgan looked between them, bemused. You're famous in vet circles, Doc? Hardly, Ellie demurred. Just experienced. She's being modest, Grandpa, Abigail insisted. Dr. Ramirez pioneered techniques for treating animals affected by environmental toxins. Her research is why we now understand how pesticide exposure impacts livestock behavior. Morgan's expression shifted subtly as this new piece of information settled into place. That why you recognized what was happening with beasts so quickly? Ellie nodded. Some of his symptoms were consistent with low-level exposure. When I saw your fields in the old well, I suspected there might be contamination issues. And you still took the challenge, Morgan said softly, knowing what you might find. I took the challenge because I knew I could help the dog, Ellie corrected him. Everything else evolved. Abigail looked between them, sensing the undercurrents. I'd love to learn more about your techniques, Dr. Ramirez. Jessica said you've been implementing some revolutionary approaches here. She has indeed, Morgan acknowledged, surprising everyone with his forthright support. Saved about 30 acres that would have been write-offs otherwise. The Blackwell land has a fighting chance because of Dr. Ramirez. The confession seemed to cost him something, but there was a new resolve in his voice. The stubborn pride now channeled into determination rather than resistance. Would you consider letting me apprentice with you while I'm home? Abigail asked Ellie eagerly. I have 3 weeks before I have to return to school. I think that's an excellent idea, Jessica interjected before Ellie could respond. In fact, I've been thinking. The county's been looking for a demonstration site for animal rehabilitation. With Beast's success story and Abigail's training, you want to turn my ranch into some kind of animal hospital? Morgan asked incredulously. Not exactly, Jessica replied carefully. More like an extension of what's already happening. A place where traumatized farm dogs and working animals could be rehabilitated using Dr. Ramirez's methods while we continue the land remediation. It would be perfect, Abigail added eagerly. The east acreage is already set up for monitoring. We could document recovery patterns in both the land and the animals. Morgan looked to Ellie, who had remained thoughtfully silent throughout the exchange. You behind this idea too, Doc? It has merit, she acknowledged. But it would be a significant commitment, not something to decide on impulse. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition that despite their complicated history, they had forged something new and unexpectedly valuable. The Blackwell legacy was never just about raising cattle, Morgan said finally. It was about stewardship. My grandfather understood that, even if later generations lost sight of it sometimes. He turned to his granddaughter, seeing in her the future of everything he'd worked for. 3 weeks. Show me what you and Dr. Ramirez can do in that time. Then we'll talk about making it permanent. As the women discussed plans, Morgan quietly slipped away to the old oak beside the house, the only one spared when lightning split its twin by the barn years ago. From a hollow in its trunk, he removed a small metal box, long hidden from view. Inside lay the original deed to the Blackwell property, alongside a faded photograph of 2 young men standing proudly before a new fence line. His father and Joaquin Ramirez, decades before the water dispute, when they had been not just neighbors but friends. Some wounds, Morgan realized, took generations to heal, and some legacies required new vision to carry forward. The Thanksgiving season brought more than just Abigail's return to Blackwell Ranch. 3 days before the holiday, the first significant snowfall of the season blanketed the fields in 6 inches of pristine white. Morgan stood on the porch at dawn, coffee mug steaming in the frigid air, watching as the eastern test plots disappeared under nature's temporary cleansing. First snow's always the prettiest, Ellie remarked, joining him with her own mug. She'd taken to staying in the old foreman's cottage near the main house, making the commute from town unnecessary during the intensive remediation work. Used to be we'd worry about cattle feed through winter, Morgan said. Now we're hoping the snow helps with soil leaching. It will, Ellie assured him. The freeze-thaw cycle helps break down some of the contaminants naturally. By spring, the eastern section should show significant improvement. Beast trotted up the porch steps, his black coat dusted with snow. The dog had become an unofficial mascot for the rehabilitation project, often accompanying the environmental teams as they worked. He's got a fan club at the county office, Morgan noted with grudging amusement. Sheriff Donovan wants to know if we'd consider letting him visit schools, show kids how animals can bounce back. Ellie smiled. He'd be good at it. His transformation is quite remarkable. So is yours, Morgan said quietly. When Ellie looked at him questioningly, he continued, coming back here after what happened to your family couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she admitted. But some things are worth facing the past for. The sound of laughter drew their attention to the barn, where Abigail was leading a workshop for several local ranchers. In just 2 weeks, she had organized a series of demonstrations combining Ellie's animal rehabilitation techniques with sustainable land management practices. She's a natural teacher, Ellie observed. Morgan nodded, pride evident in his expression. Gets that from her grandmother. Martha could make anyone understand anything, no matter how complicated. I remember, Ellie said softly. Morgan turned to her, surprise evident. You knew Martha? Everyone in Riverdale knew Martha Johnson before she became Martha Blackwell, Ellie replied. She tutored half the county in mathematics, including me. Morgan fell silent, processing this new connection. There's a lot we haven't talked about, isn't there? About the old days. Perhaps it's time we did, Ellie suggested. But first, I have something to show you. She led him to her Subaru and retrieved a weathered leather portfolio from the back seat. Inside were dozens of meticulously organized maps and soil surveys, some dating back 50 years. My father's records, she explained, spreading them on the porch table. He documented changing water tables, soil composition, crop yields across the entire region, including Blackwell Ranch. Morgan's eyes widened as he recognized the detailed annotations. These are better than the county surveyor's maps. My father was thorough, Ellie said with quiet pride. After he lost our farm, he worked as a consultant for several agricultural colleges. Always off the books, of course. No one would hire him officially after the lawsuit. Morgan's face clouded. Because of my father's testimony. Because the truth wasn't convenient, Ellie corrected gently. But look at this. She pointed to a series of soil sample analyses from the eastern section of Blackwell Ranch dated 1978, just after the lawsuit. He predicted exactly what we're seeing now. The contamination pattern, the decreasing yields, even the timeline. Morgan stared at the yellowed papers, the evidence of a scientific vindication 4 decades too late. All these years, we could have prevented this. Perhaps, Ellie acknowledged. Or perhaps the science needed to catch up with his theories. What matters is that we're addressing it now. From the barn, Abigail emerged with the visiting ranchers. Their animated conversation carried across the snow-covered yard as they examined the monitoring equipment installed along the field boundaries. They're actually listening, Morgan said with quiet amazement. 3 months ago, these same men were calling me crazy for letting a city vet tell me how to run my ranch. Success is persuasive, Ellie replied. And your willingness to change has given them permission to consider changes of their own. Morgan's weathered hands carefully refolded the maps. Why did you really come back, Ellie? After all this time? She met his gaze steadily. When my father died, he left me these records and a letter. He wrote that he'd spent his life gathering evidence, but had never managed to implement the solutions. His final wish was that someone would finally use his research to heal the land. And you chose Blackwell Ranch, the very place that helped destroy your family's farm. Ellie smiled gently. I chose the place where the evidence was strongest and the need was greatest. That it happened to be your ranch was complicated, but perhaps necessary. Before Morgan could respond, Jessica's truck pulled into the driveway, followed by several official vehicles bearing State Agricultural Department logos. The grant inspectors, Morgan sighed. Right on time. Ready to show them what we've accomplished? Ellie asked. For a moment, Morgan hesitated, decades of pride and stubbornness warring with new pragmatism. Then he straightened his shoulders, an echo of the command presence that had once made him the most formidable rancher in the county. You know, he said thoughtfully, my grandfather had a saying, land doesn't belong to the Blackwells. Blackwells belong to the land. I think he'd approve of what we're doing here. As the officials approached, Morgan extended his hand to Ellie, not just in partnership, but in the beginning of a true reconciliation. Let's show them how Blackwell Ranch is leading the way forward. Across the snow-covered fields, the morning sun broke through winter clouds, illuminating the eastern test plots where new cover crops pushed determinately through the white blanket, green shoots of promise rising from a land that was finally learning to heal. In the ranch house kitchen that evening, 3 generations gathered around Martha Blackwell's old oak table. Morgan sat at the head, with Jessica and Abigail on one side, Ellie on the other. Beast lay contentedly beneath, occasionally accepting scraps from all parties. The state inspectors were impressed, Jessica reported, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes. They're recommending our application for the full remediation grant. And 2 more ranchers signed up for the spring demonstration project, Abigail added excitedly. Mr. Henderson even asked if I'd consult on his operation when I graduate next year. Morgan nodded approvingly. Henderson's one of the old guard. If he's convinced, others will follow. The environmental team leader mentioned something interesting. Ellie said, her expression thoughtful. The contamination pattern shows a clear boundary at the old creek bed, exactly where my father's maps predicted the watershed division would be. A contemplative silence fell over the table as the implications settled. After 40 years, Joaquin Ramirez's research was finally being validated. He was right all along, Morgan acknowledged quietly. About everything. He would have been gratified to know that, Ellie said. But I think he'd be more pleased to see what's happening now. The land healing, the community coming together. To healing, Jessica proposed, raising her glass in a toast. And to new beginnings, Abigail added. As their glasses clinked, Morgan's gaze met Ellie's across the table. 2 adversaries turned allies, brought together by a shared love for the land that had once divided their families. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering old boundaries and new hope in equal measure. 6 months after Tommy's rescue, Blackwell Ranch had transformed in ways Morgan could never have imagined. The spring thaw revealed dramatic improvements in the eastern test plots, with soil tests showing a 40% reduction in contaminant levels. What had begun as a desperate experiment was now a model for sustainable remediation throughout the county. On a warm Saturday in late April, cars lined the long driveway leading to the ranch house. The annual Harvest County Agricultural Expo had chosen Blackwell Ranch as its showcase destination, bringing farmers, ranchers, and agricultural officials from 3 states to witness the remarkable revival. Morgan stood at the edge of the demonstration field, dressed in clean jeans and a pressed shirt, his concession to the formality of the occasion. Beside him, Ellie wore a simple blouse and slacks, her silver-streaked hair catching the morning sunlight as she explained soil restoration techniques to an attentive group of visitors. The key is working with natural processes rather than against them, she emphasized, kneeling to gather a handful of rich, dark soil. This land isn't just cleaner, it's becoming more alive again. Morgan nodded in agreement. 6 months ago, nothing would grow here without chemical assistance. Now look. He gestured toward the vibrant cover crops stretching across the once barren field. Nature knows how to heal itself, if we give it the chance. Near the barn, Abigail led another demonstration. Having extended her leave from veterinary school to complete a special research project, she had established a small animal rehabilitation center in the renovated stable. Beast served as her assistant, his calm presence helping to settle nervous farm dogs brought in with behavioral issues. The connection between land health and animal health is inseparable, Abigail explained to her audience. What we've learned here is that trauma, whether in soil or in animals, requires patience and understanding to overcome. Jessica approached Morgan and Ellie as the morning sessions concluded. The state agricultural director wants to speak with you both, she said with barely contained excitement. They're considering Blackwell Ranch for the Regional Conservation Award. Morgan's eyebrows rose. Conservation Award? My father would have a conniption. Your father was a product of his time, Ellie remarked gently. Just as we all are. The difference is whether we're willing to grow beyond it. As visitors broke for lunch at the tables set up beneath the old oak trees, Morgan noticed a familiar car pulling into the driveway. A distinguished older man stepped out, adjusting his glasses as he surveyed the gathering. Professor Hamilton, Ellie exclaimed with surprise. I didn't expect you until tomorrow. Couldn't miss the big showcase, the professor replied, embracing her warmly. The university committee is very interested in your proposal, Ellie, especially now that I've seen the results firsthand. Morgan looked between them questioningly. Dr. Hamilton was my father's colleague at the university, Ellie explained. He's here representing the Agricultural Research Department. We've been reviewing Dr. Ramirez's proposal for an endowed research position, the professor elaborated. A joint appointment that would allow her to continue the work here while contributing to our environmental sciences program. Morgan's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. You're thinking of leaving? Not leaving, Ellie corrected. Expanding. The work we've started here deserves wider application. With the university's backing, we could establish Blackwell Ranch as a permanent research and demonstration site. Before Morgan could respond, Mayor Thompson called everyone to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to officially recognize the Blackwell-Ramirez Partnership for Agricultural Innovation. Applause rippled through the crowd as Morgan and Ellie were urged forward. Jessica handed the mayor a ceremonial plaque, her face beaming with pride. 6 months ago, this ranch was facing environmental challenges that seemed insurmountable, the mayor continued. Today, it stands as a testament to what can be accomplished when tradition and innovation work hand in hand. The methods pioneered here are already being implemented on 7 other properties throughout the county, with remarkable results. As the ceremony concluded, Morgan found himself momentarily alone with Ellie beneath the shade of his grandfather's oak tree. A partnership, he mused, fingering the edge of the plaque. Not exactly what either of us had in mind when you showed up to tame my troublesome dog. Ellie smiled. Life rarely follows our expectations. Sometimes it offers something better. The university position, Morgan said carefully. It's a good opportunity for you. It is, she agreed. But it would mean dividing my time between here and campus. Morgan was silent for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. You know, when Martha was alive, she always said this place was too big for just one family. Said we should open it up, make it more than just a cattle operation. She was a wise woman. She was, Morgan agreed. And I was too stubborn to listen. He turned to face Ellie directly. The Blackwell-Ramirez partnership has a certain historical irony to it, doesn't it? Perhaps it's not irony, but resolution, Ellie suggested. Our fathers began something they couldn't finish. Maybe we're meant to complete it. From across the yard, Beast trotted toward them, followed by Abigail. The dog now moved with the confident grace of an animal secure in his place and purpose, a living symbol of the rehabilitation possible when patience replaced force and understanding overcame fear. Grandpa, Abigail called. The university representatives want to discuss establishing a permanent veterinary residency program here. They think the ranch could become a specialized training center for environmental veterinary medicine. Morgan's eyes met Ellie's, a lifetime of stubbornness giving way to newfound vision. What do you think, Doc? Is Blackwell Ranch ready to become a teaching facility? I think, Ellie replied with quiet certainty, that your grandfather would say the land has found its purpose again. As the afternoon sun bathed the rejuvenated fields in golden light, Morgan looked out over the property that had been his family's legacy for 4 generations. The boundaries that had once seemed so rigid, between Blackwell's and Ramirez's, between tradition and innovation, between pride and progress, had softened, creating space for something new to emerge. Beast sat contentedly between them, his transformation from troubled outcast to beloved companion mirroring the larger healing taking place across the land. Like the dog, the ranch had found a new purpose, not by abandoning its past, but by integrating the best of its heritage with the promise of a different future. To legacy renewed, Morgan said softly, echoing Jessica's toast from months before, and to partnerships that heal old wounds. As visitors continued to explore the revitalized Blackwell Ranch, Morgan and Ellie stood side by side beneath the ancient oak, 2 unlikely allies joined by a shared vision that bridged generations of conflict and pointed toward a future neither could have imagined alone. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you've watched this far, comment, I watched this far, and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.